Third Strike's tier list is not something people talk about very often these days, and there's plenty of valid reasons for that. I mean, I'm probably going to put one on screen right now, just because it, coincides with what I'm talking about. And it's probably pissing you off, either because you think it's wrong, or because you could have just really done without seeing a tier list today. There's just not a whole lot to be gained from that kind of discussion, considering that Third Strike has been the way it is for such an extended period of time. There's no patch coming for this game. Nothing's happening to that thing that sucks, or that button you hate anytime soon. And we've had plenty of time to familiarize ourselves with the game and its meta. And honestly, that's kind of really nice. Balance patches can be really exciting when done well, but there's something undeniably satisfying about getting really invested in what you know is the final version of a fighting game. Knowing that everything you love about the game isn't going to fundamentally change, and that discovering new tech or overcoming difficult matchups or situations is completely up to you and the community. It's really awesome. I mean, there's a reason every fighting game that I'm actually invested in and actively enjoy playing these days falls under this umbrella. The closest I've come to a game I play getting patched in like a year is legitimately EU Melee tournaments slowly starting to run unfrozen Pokemon Stadium like they do in America. And honestly, I kinda don't fuck with it. One change and I am immediately grumpy, and that's something. Still, just because Third Strike has a pretty set in stone meta doesn't mean it's a solved game. Plenty of weaker characters still pop up frequently enough in higher level play like Alex and Remy, and I've definitely seen opinions of some of the game's weaker characters generally shift over time. It's not like you're going to get bored with Third Strike just because the meta isn't going to change anytime soon. Even outside of characters like Yun and Urien, who have absurdly high skill ceilings that you could spend years trying to reach, Third Strike is just an incredibly fun game to sink a lot of time into. It's fine just the way it is, and I love it to pieces for a myriad of reasons. Still, regardless of how you feel about this random list that I just subjected you to, there's two things about it I'd imagine almost everybody could agree on. These two are the top two, and these two are the bottom two. 12 and Sean are two of the most notorious bottom tiers in fighting game history, and a lot of people are generally familiar with why that's the case, even people who might have never touched Third Strike. 12 is a strange character with an extremely unorthodox kit, and maybe due to concerns at Capcom back in the day about how strong or annoying to fight it could be, considering how new something like this was for Street Fighter, the character got stuck with terrible conversions and the absolute lowest damage in the game. Sean, on the other hand, after a solid run as a high-tier character in Street Fighter III Second Impact, was deliberately made weak in Third Strike to essentially serve as the game's Dan. There's a few pretty obvious tells this was the dev's intention, like his heavy jump normals uniquely having the hit stun of mediums, some of his grounded heavy normals having the meter build of mediums, and losing the cool second hit on Dragon Smash, so it goes from a very unique looking move that really gets his style and personality across, to a bog standard DP, but just worse. One that can't really stand up to Ryu, Ken, or Akuma's on any metric. It's a huge shame considering that not only did the three characters in Second Impact who were better than him go on to be good to amazing in Third Strike, but they actually went on to have strong appearances in future games, while Sean hasn't been playable since Third Strike. He showed up in an SF5 cutscene to get his doohickey melted by Fang, and that's about as good as it's been for him since. Still, a lot of this is pretty common knowledge. There's already been countless videos detailing these characters' shortcomings, and people joke about the two of them constantly. Especially 12. People love this funny little guy. Still, I do think just how bad these two characters are tends to be exaggerated a little bit. They're undeniably bottom tier, but bottom tier in a game that isn't egregiously unbalanced. You look at the gap between Third Strike Chun and 12, and then the gap between Second Impact Akuma and Hugo, and then all of a sudden you get defeat and everything's gonna be okay. At most levels of play, anyone in this game can cook, and I want to talk about just what these two are cooking with. Today, I want to put a little bit of a spin on things and primarily focus on the genuine strengths of 12 and Sean, the things you'll find yourself using the most if you're committed to making these characters work. I'm not going to be glazing these characters by any means. I want to give them credit where it's due, but I don't want to ignore what makes them weak and pretend they're secretly better than they are. I will be mentioning severe weaknesses with them from time to time, which might seem a little strange given the premise of the video, but it's primarily to contextualize the strong parts of their kits. As an example, think of Chun-Li's Super 2, a top tier super on a top tier character, but to get the idea of how strong it is across, people will often point to Chun without meter, pointing out that despite having phenomenal neutral, she has very limited punish game and very poor conversions. That's not Chun downplay, it just helps convey how absurd Super 2 is for her, because it patches up those major issues better than maybe any other Super in the game. We're gonna start with 12 and end with Sean. Firstly, because, well, I got my ass beat in bracket by a 12 player at UFA, and it resonated with me, to put it politely, but more importantly, because I think it's much easier to talk about 12 in this context. 12 is a completely unique character who just happens to be weak. If you resonate with their unique strengths and want to take advantage of them, you have nowhere else to go other than playing 12 yourself. Their good traits are completely valid, and there's a lot to talk about, but they're still a bottom tier because those unique strengths simply don't make up for their shortcomings. Sean, on the other hand, is unfortunately a lot harder to upplay because, unlike 12, he was intentionally designed to be the weakest out of a group of 4 characters all built off the same template. And as a result, a lot of Sean's best traits are simply done better by other characters. There is some stuff completely unique to Sean that is quite strong, but unfortunately a lot of his better tools are just worse versions of tools that Ryu, Ken, or Akuma have, and it's very hard to not draw comparisons between them. There's a good reason why, even though the gap between Sean and 12 is not super big, you see much more 12 in competitive play than you do Sean. There's simply more reason to play 12. And one last super quick thing, if you do end up enjoying this video, you could potentially support me on my Patreon or my Ko-Fi. Sorry if this is annoying, this is my first fighting game video where I've showed a little bit, but it is also my first fighting game video since I moved out, so the support is genuinely greatly appreciated. Nothing is locked behind them, they're just there if you want to support me and help keep the channel sponsor free, which I am 100% dedicated to doing because fuck a lot of them. Anyways, thanks for putting up with that, and let's get back to the real stuff. So 12's single best trait is their mobility. Air dash on its own is really strong, allowing them to pressure the opponent with extremely low to the ground jump normals, high-low mix-ups, left-right mix-ups, and if needed, play a more defensive game and just aim to evade the opponent altogether, either building meter, running the timer, or with the intention of baiting something unsafe. It's not just air dash either. 12's kit has surprisingly good cohesion, and their variety of unique movement options and angles that they can cover with their attacks give them a pretty good capacity to control space, pressure their opponent, and generally influence the pace of the match. The primary reason that 12 is weak despite this powerful tool is skewed risk versus reward. As I previously mentioned, 12 is the lowest damage character in the game, and on top of that they have middling defensive options and the 5th lowest health in the game. 12 needs to win significantly more interactions than their opponent does to take rounds, and you'll often see or play games where it seems like 12 is dominating early on, only for the game to become even after one good play on their opponent's end. Still, there's no denying that while they're typically not being rewarded a ton for winning interactions, 12's tools for initiating and engaging in said interactions are actually quite good on the whole. Their normals are mostly great, although you need to be careful with when and where you use some of them, and some of their specials have more use cases than you might expect. However, before any of that, I'd like to focus on 12's SFIII, because not only is it just a generally good super, but good utilization of it actually allows 12 to somewhat alleviate some of their biggest issues. It's a great tool that fills a legitimate hole in 12's game plan. And just to touch on them real quick, SFIII and SFIII aren't really worth dedicating much time to. SFIII does hit hard, but having one reliable confirm sucks, as does being one long bar on a character with very good EX. SFIII on the other hand is just straight garbage. This is easily a bottom 5 super. It is strictly relegated to trolling, combo videos, or playing as Gil if you're trapped in 1999. SFIII is extremely versatile, and its decent damage forces the opponent to respect 12's offense significantly more. Good mix and mobility only means so much if the worst case scenario for the opponent is like a throw or a weak combo that doesn't even knock down. SFIII is the only thing that 12 can regularly combo into that grants a knockdown, adding even more layers to their game plan with the ability to threaten safe jumps and meaty overhead, which can, again, lead into another super. The fact that you can stock a second super is really valuable, as it means 12's most threatening options don't immediately vanish after landing a super, and it also gives 12 much more freedom when it comes to using EX moves. One of the most valuable aspects of SFIII is how easy it is to land. Running SFIII gives 12 both a grounded confirm to super that can only be parried low, and a grounded confirm to super that can only be parried high. This is not a unique trait in Third Strike by any means, but still an incredibly strong one and one that several characters lack. 12 is very thankful for this. Still, it is worth noting that 12's unique low confirm of cancelling crouching light kick into a safe special is worse than the typical low confirmed crouching medium kick or chained crouching light kicks, neither of which 12 has, as crouching medium kick isn't cancelable, and while crouching light kick technically chains into itself, this is mostly irrelevant to confirms, as the timing is frame perfect, and going into axe after 2 crouching light kicks only works on a small handful of crouching wide characters. Mid-screen, I think it's literally just Urian. Light punch axe is -5 on block if both hits connect, and several characters can punish you if they have the right super. Here's every relevant super in the game that can punish light punch axe on block from any range. These ones can also punish you, but you can space light punch axe to be safe. And these two are just kind of funny, since they're a guaranteed punish at any range, but the super will actually fall out after getting pretty minuscule damage. So you get a guaranteed punish on their guaranteed punish, and your guaranteed punish is probably way stronger. It doesn't matter a ton for Remy, because he can punish you from any range with light flash kick, but yeah, this does actually suck for Alex, that's pretty sad. Outside of confirms, SA1 also helps 12 defensively. It's not invincible and doesn't hit super high, but it does have frame 1 low profile, making it a phenomenal anti-air. It's a pretty tough one to parry too. It's not perfect by any means. Depending on how it hits, the damage can be underwhelming, and it can still lose to deep hitting jump-ins, but it doesn't really need to be perfect. SA1 is just one of a wide variety of anti-airs that all shine in different situations. No character in Third Strike has a one-size-fits-all anti-air, and 12 is no exception. SA1's low profile also makes it a good anti-fireball tool. It'll go under most fireball supers, even if they're right on top of you as you wake up with it, and you can use it to avoid chip scenarios or things like Denjin setups. It won't go under everything though, make sure to do your homework. It's situationally nice for punishing things on block too. It hits on frame 4, which is really good, but it's a bit finicky with ranged punishes, as the travel time is kind of a nightmare. Great to have for sure, but you'd be shocked at some of the stuff this can punish. SA1 is also really important in post-parry punishes, even if it's not the only thing you can get in that scenario. Might seem like an obvious thing to point out, but parry is an incredibly important part of Third Strike, and the fact that 12 is maybe the worst character at capitalizing on important parries is a serious weakness and should be acknowledged as such. Either way, SA1 is really important for alleviating this the best you can. SA1 is not a top tier super by any means, but it cannot be overstated just how important it is for 12. Still, they do have to play a good chunk of the game without it, so let's talk about the rest of 12's kit and the parts of it that really shine. Starting with a pretty funky one. Yeah, we're gonna start off with 12's walk of all things. And not for the reasons a walk is usually good. 12 actually has pretty mediocre grounded mobility with a slow walk and slow dashes. Both 12's forward and back walk have low profile starting on frame 3. This was probably intended to be used against fireballs, which does work, but weirdly the main benefit to this is that walking forward is a legitimate anti-air. You don't shrink 12's hurtbox quite as much as there are other options that grant low profile. How effective this is will vary from character to character. Some characters have very good deep hitting jump ins that kind of make this a non-issue, but others have to make a much more conscious effort to play around it. None of the Shoto jump heavies can hit you, for example. They instead need to use a late jump medium kick, which is fine, but will lose to some of 12's other anti-airs. Walk forward into hitting the opponent during their landing recovery is a bizarrely effective anti-air. There is obviously counterplay, even on characters without deep jump-ins, but there's other anti-air options that beat those, so that's totally fine. Moving on to normals, 12 has generally good lights, with all of them hitting on frame 4. Crouching light kick starts your low confirm and is a decent poke. Crouching light punch has more reach and great frame advantage, and while standing light punch whiffs on nearly all crouches, it has absurd range for a light normal, being great for stuffing approaches or as a niche anti-air option. Stand light kick is also here. It's not awful, it's just like kind of a nothing burger. Far medium punch is one of your best pokes. It whiffs on every crouching character other than Hugo, but it has fantastic range and decent recovery. Close medium punch is your only cancelable normal that cannot be parried low, and it has a long enough cancel window that it can easily confirm to Super 1. Medium punch is also 12's go-to button for Kara throw. Annoyingly, far medium punch gives much more range in Kara cancels than close medium punch, but if you're at the range where you'd want to take advantage of this, most of the time you're within the proximity to get close medium punch instead, which just isn't as good for Kara throw. Still, it's good to have, and far medium punch Kara cancels are still nice for things like Kara universal overhead.
Speaking of, stand light kick and stand heavy kick actually move you backwards when used in Kara cancels, which while useless for throw can actually be nice in combination with universal overhead to set up better spacings. Crouching medium punch is a situational anti-air with good startup and a nice hitbox, but no disjoint. But maybe more importantly, it's your best normal to whiff for meter build. You'll find yourself doing this a lot if you play 12. Standing medium kick is an advancing move that can be cancelled to super or super jump. It's a good frame trap option, and the super jump cancel allows you to either stay safe and disengage, or run pressure when it connects, and the forward movement can also help in specific confirms or punishes. Crouching medium kick is a good low poke. Not interestingly or uniquely good in any way, but you know, it ain't much, but it's honest work. Back medium kick is weird but not terrible. It looks like an anti-air, but it actually doesn't hit above 12 until frame 10, and it only does so for a single frame with a middling hitbox. Still, it covers a pretty unique angle, and it is cancelable, so it's not useless. 12's heavies are a strange bunch, but there's definitely some good stuff here. Standing heavy punch is a little bit too slow to be a consistent anti-air, with the anti-air hitbox not appearing until frame 15. But still, the hitbox is really good, and it does high damage and stun, which 12 will definitely take. It's best used to catch jumps preemptively, or as your strongest ender after EX Needle. Stand heavy kick is your furthest reaching grounded poke. It is quite slow at frame 18 and potentially unsafe at -11 on block, but it's still a situationally strong tool. It's nice being able to hit at this range without committing to an air dash, and it's much more rewarding than meterless needle. We've all seen Chun punish this at max range with Super 2, but obviously not everyone is Chun. Most characters can't do that, so make use of it where it makes sense to. The damage and stun are both great, so you want to use it at least a little bit. As for 12's crouching heavies, they're not great. Sweep is pretty slow and is unsafe even when spaced, but knockdowns are hard to come by for 12, so it definitely has a place. Crouching heavy punch is just terrible though. I'm pretty sure this normal doesn't do anything. Just don't use it. So on the whole, despite low damage and a lack of anything truly broken, I do think it's fair to say that 12 is working with a pretty decent set of grounded normals. However, on a character like 12, that's only half the story, because we need to touch on their air normals. And fittingly enough, there's some good stuff here too. Both of 12's air lights are mostly used in air dash pressure, as they're your only air normals that connect against most crouches if air dash is done as close to the ground as possible. This is admittedly a little frustrating as they're weak and hard to link out of, being straight up punishable on hit if you hit them too high. But regardless, you'll end up using them a lot because they're very important to 12. 12's air mediums have excellent reach but hit quite high, so you can't really use them the same way you would their lights. They're primarily used as long-range pokes or air-to-airs, and for this purpose they're excellent. Their high hitboxes are also nice for catching jumps sometimes. Notably, Hugo can't crouch them, so make sure to bully the shit out of him. This is where I would include some footage of me bullying Hugo, but the only one I ran into while playing 12 absolutely beat my ass, so my bad. Jumping heavy punch is a phenomenal normal, but one that you'll definitely get blown up for misusing. Its damage is kinda low for a heavy jump in, and it's got a hefty startup of 12 frames, but the massive range makes it an excellent poke in air-to-air. Neither of 12's air heavies come out if performed out of an instant air dash, which is both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it lets you bluff an air light and mix the opponent with empty land throw or low, but on the other hand, it forces you to poke with air dash heavy punch from higher up, which makes the move more telegraphed. The move may have a big hitbox, but the hurtbox is also brutal, and 12 extends their hurtbox a lot before the hitbox actually comes out. Jumping heavy punch is great, but very easy to play around if used predictably. 12's air dash game carries quite a lot of risk due to their inability to parry out of it and their low health, so make sure to stay unpredictable by mixing in regular jumps, empty jumps, and air dashes cancel to other options to alter your trajectory, such as air axe or jumping heavy kick. Speaking of jump heavy kick, this is fully unironically one of the best jump normals in the game. It has an incredibly narrow and deep hitbox, which stops anti-airs and enables very ambiguous mix in combination with air dash. It can hit in the front or cross up, and sometimes even hit in the front and then have 12 themselves cross up. This is almost definitely 12's best normal. It's real good. Granted, if you don't have super, whatever you do after landing this move won't be that scary, but that doesn't make this move any less phenomenal. Moving on to specials, there's a few real standouts here, but almost everything has some kind of a place in 12's game plan. In total, 12 has 4 specials, each with 4 distinct versions, and while there's something to comment on with most of them, I'll start with the absolute best, EX Needle.
EX Needle is very different from your typical projectile, but it's one of the best zoning tools in the game, and one of 12's best features, period. It's slower than most EX fireballs, hitting on frame 13, but makes up for it by having no travel time as it tracks the opponent's location. It also has really good recovery, being 0 on block and having a total duration of just 40 frames, which is excellent compared to the likes of Shoto fireballs. EX Needle also hits twice, which is great against parry, and while the damage and stun are pretty unremarkable, it does launch the opponent on hit, allowing for a potential juggle. You'll mostly go into either stand heavy punch, stand heavy kick, or far medium punch depending on screen position and distance. It's also a situationally good anti-air because it has the same low profile as SFIII starting on frame 10. It can be a little tough to use on reaction thanks to the startup, but it's in particular really strong against cross-ups and dive kicks. It's also extremely active, with a hitbox present for 12 frames, which makes it a little more lenient as an anti-air and an amazing option to throw out against an opponent who's waking up or landing from an air reset. Honestly, the biggest weakness of EX Needle is the fact it's an EX move. It's so good you just want to constantly throw it out, but you can't because you do need the meter for other stuff. The fact that 12 has no guaranteed way of comboing into this move means it can be really tempting to just let it rip whenever, but considering how important SFIII is, you need to be smart about when you commit to using it. If you desperately want a combo to EX Needle, just hop on Forward Striker Ranged Edition, you know how it is. Meterless Needle isn't that bad. Like, we've all seen Shun SA2 punish the heavy version on hit, and as funny as that is, again, not everyone is Chun. The meterless versions hit at set distances from 12 rather than tracking like EX, with stronger versions reaching further at the cost of being worse on hit and block. The recovery is much more significant than EX, but as long as they aren't jumped, you'll be safe against the vast majority of the cast. Think of them like a Nakali ground pound from SF5 that trades a knockdown and safety on block for vastly improved startup. Yep, that's right, buddy, I made you think about Nakali for the first time in like a million years. How's that feel? Either way, EX Needle is incredible, and Meterless Needle is situationally good. Just don't be too predictable with either of them, as 12 is considered crouching during the move, so you'll take massive damage if it's jumped. I've already discussed the most important strength of Axe, that being its use in 12's low confirm, but there is more to talk about. Light Punch and Medium Punch Axe complement 12's anti-air game well, since while on their own their hitboxes aren't super well suited to anti-airing, they're great against air parry attempts, since either on their own or when cancelled into, they hit multiple times and you can mash them to increase the number of hits. Raw Axe is also a situationally good Oki tool, as all versions beat low parry and medium and heavy punch Axe do decent damage by 12 standards. They're slightly more unsafe than Light Punch though, at -6 and 7 on block respectively, so do be careful. Do bear in mind that from further out, the last hits of Axe will whiff, and if this happens, you're punishable on hit and block. This is partially why cancelling close medium punch into medium Axe for an easier super confirm is not adequate. Just practice the raw close medium punch confirm. EX Axe unfortunately isn't all that great. It has 8 frame startup, a perfect middle ground between light and medium, and slightly more damage than heavy punch Axe while being the safest of the 4 on block. But it just doesn't really match up to 12's other metered options. I've already touched on a key use of Air Axe, that being its ability to alter 12's air movement. But on top of that, it's a good air-to-air thanks to its multiple hits and can be used to cross up the opponent. It's good, but you do need to be careful with how you use it against grounded opponents, as all versions of the move are minus on hit and block. You can be punished even for hitting it pretty low, so be careful. EX Dive is an extremely useful move due to its 6 frame startup, fast movement, and disjointed hitbox, making it a great air-to-air and a great air-to-ground option since it knocks down and can be performed incredibly low to the ground. If you get both hits, it's at best -2 on block, which is mostly safe. If you're really low, it can just hit once, and you're -1 on both hit and block, since it won't knock down. One interesting use of it that I don't think is super practical, but I find really cool, is that it can actually juggle from EX Needle if you're close. It's kinda hard and pretty expensive, but weirdly it's your highest damage ender here other than super, which scales horrendously and is even more expensive. There's a non-zero chance you'd actually want to go for this. If nothing else, it is pretty stylish. Meterless Dive is a move that I used to think was complete garbage, but I've recently learned has a small handful of interesting uses. All 3 versions travel at different angles, but they're painfully slow, each having 14 frames of startup. They're not disjointed, only hit once, and 12 bounces off the opponent on contact, leaving them +2 on hit and -13 on block, best case scenario. Aiming to hit the opponent with this is usually a bad idea. But as a mobility tool, the heavy kick one is actually a situationally good option for escaping the corner. something that's pretty nice to have on a character with such limited defensive options. Another interesting application of the move is that unlike EX Dive, you can actually perform meterless dive out of an air dash, so you could use it as a niche way to mix up your approach. Also, if the opponent is on pixel health, it might be tempting to try and chip the opponent out with these, but you're probably better off using Needle, which is safer, or EX Dive, which is 2 parries instead of 1. One last thing that's not really a special, but there's not a better place to talk about it, is 12's Taunt. It makes them temporarily invisible, and unlike nearly every other taunt in the game, there's no damage, stun, or defense buff to go along with this. The temporary invis is the only upside. Unfortunately, it's quite committal, taking 79 frames after inputting the move before 12 is actionable again. A character with such varied movement turning invisible is a little scary, but the invis lasting such a short time combined with the lengthy install makes it hard to capitalize on. It is very fun, but if you have an opportunity to go for this, that time would probably be better spent building meter or positioning. So that's basically everything I have to say for 12, and I will say I hope it doesn't come across like I'm trying to oversell this character. I do think 12 is cool, but I promise I'm not trying to make an army of new 12 players or anything. 12 is a fun character when everything goes right, but they're also a weak character and a weird character. Hopping on 12 without a solid understanding of the character or their game plan is probably going to end in disaster. I had a lot of fun playing them for this video, and like when everything comes together and it feels like you're stringing a lot of good decisions together, it feels awesome. But shit, when things go bad, they go bad really, really fast. Still, we are talking about the bottom 2 today, so I think it's about time we got to the other half of that equation. And I'll tell you up front, we will not be spending as much time on Sean as we did 12. 12 is such a weird and unique character that you really feel the need to squeeze every little bit of good out of their kit as you possibly can. But Sean's just kinda different. A lot of Sean's best traits aren't super worth touching on because they're things other characters that are very similar to him do better. And while there is stuff that's unique to him, there's not a huge amount of it. Sean's definitely a character where I feel like a lot of the reasons to play him stem from having fun rather than having objective strengths over other characters. Still, I want to give credit where it's due, so let's talk about Sean and what he has going for him. The first thing I'd like to touch on with Sean is less of a unique strength and more of an elephant in the room. It is true that a lot of Sean's normals, specifically the ones shared with the other Shotos, are worse versions of those other characters' normals. However, I don't think it's as much of a weakness as some people make it out to be. For a start, it's just not the case for a lot of them. Sean's lights, crouch medium punch, and air lights and mediums are legitimately on par with the other Shotos. The real weakness is usually what he gets off these normals, but even then he's not hopeless. We'll be touching more on that soon. And even for the ones that are worse Shoto normals are still quite good compared to the cast as a whole. Some are barely worse off, like his close heavy punch, and even normals that are obviously much worse, like crouching medium kick and crouching heavy kick, aren't bad overall. His crouching medium kick has the slowest startup of Ryu's and the worst frame advantage of Ken's while having a shorter hitbox than both. But that's still a cancelable crouching medium kick. Lots of characters would kill for that. Crouching heavy kick is one of the most blatant stinkers in Sean's kit, being the slowest, shortest, weakest, and most unsafe of the Shoto sweeps. But it's still a relatively fast and long-reaching normal that knocks down. It's a normal sweep. Characters like Necro, Q, and let's be honest, 12 would trade their own sweeps for this in a heartbeat. Moving on to actual things he has over the other Shotos, his mobility is worth noting. Sean's walk and dashes are some of the best of the bunch, with the second fastest forward walk speed among the Shotos behind Ken, and the fastest back walk speed by a decent margin. His dashes have the same duration as Ryu and Akuma, so 1 frame slower on forward dash than Ken, but he shares Ken's longer back dash and uniquely has the longest forward dash of the Shotos, traveling 112 pixels instead of 95. It is worth noting he doesn't have much in the way of unique movement options. He lacks anything on the level of Ken's absurd EX Air Tatsu or Akuma's dive kick. He does have some unique stuff like roll and tackle, but their applications are definitely more niche. Sean also has a strange super jump that doesn't travel as far as the other Shotos, and honestly, whether or not this is a strength or weakness, I think depends on your super choice. With Super 1 I'd say it's a weakness, because it doesn't really synergize well with the knockdown, and then you're just stuck with a shorter super jump, which is worse for things like escaping the corner, I guess. SA2 and SA3 on the other hand leave the opponent much closer with their hard knockdowns, and as a result, the super jump is perfect for getting ambiguous cross-ups. I'll get into it more later, but both of these supers are quite good, so I'd say this is overall worth it. although it's not as good for Super 3 since if you land it, you will have no meter, and as a result, whatever you do after the cross-up won't be that scary. As for Sean's unique moves, there's not a ton here that you can point to and be like, yeah, that's better than stuff the other Shotos have, but what's here is quite notable. Close heavy kick is Sean's equivalent to Ryu and Akuma's close medium kick, and it's legitimately one of the best normals in the entire game. It is the single highest damage cancelable normal in Third Strike, and on top of that it has 5 frame startup, good stun output, and a 15 frame cancel window that allows Sean to confirm all 3 of his supers. It can also only be parried high, and Sean has at least one low confirm into all 3 supers, so he's another character with confirms to super that beat both parries, and he's much better off than 12 in that regard, since the confirms are safer. If close heavy kick has any weakness, it's the pushback. Sean struggles to take advantage of the plus frames this move gives on hit and block due to how far away he's left and his lack of good long-reaching high-only parryable options. Crouching medium kick reaches, but obviously that's low parryable, you can't push that every time. Standing medium kick reaches, but annoyingly, even though it's just a basic poke like Ryu and Akuma's far medium kick, unlike them, this move can be parried both high or low. It'll lose to mashing a lot too because of the absolutely diabolical hurt box during startup. Far heavy punch usually reaches, but it's a little slow and inconsistent on crouches at range, and even if it does reach, it's -5 on hit and -7 on block, which can be unsafe. Sean has a good Kara throw with forward heavy punch, granting an extra 14 pixels of range, which is probably the best aspect of the move. It's not very good even if a 2-hit overhead sounds neat. Not to mention a 2-hit overhead is also something the other Shotos have and do better, but still, you have to walk so much after this move connects, it's not particularly threatening. You could try and cancel close heavy kick into tackle, fake tackle, or wheel kick to get something a little tighter, but these are kinda hokey and carry significant risk. They're fine once in a while though. The high pushback also makes some combos a little inconsistent. You're practically never going into DP off this, and EX Tatsu, one of Sean's most important enders, can lose the first hit when done even off a point-blank close heavy kick. Still, this move is incredible, and one of Sean's best features. People love to point to the fact that Sean's meterless Tatsus are punishable on hit, and yeah, that obviously sucks. But like, a heavy jump into close heavy kick on a croucher does a lot of damage. And all I'm saying is you're not punishing nothing on anything if you're dead. Moving on to other strengths, Sean has the highest damaging throw of any of the Shotos with his back throw. Unless, for some reason, you count Ken's mash throw if he mashes and the opponent just doesn't feel like mashing in response for some reason. This is obviously quite nice, but weirdly it does incredibly low stun, doing about half of the other Shotos' forward throws and less than a third of their back throws. I don't think it matters a ton because Sean's forward throw does more stun than the other Shotos to compensate, which is probably the throw you'd rather have do more stun, but it's definitely kind of odd. Sean has 2 target combos. His close heavy punch, forward heavy punch one is pretty much just a knowledge check, and not a good one since the first hit doesn't combo into the second, and the overhead itself is just as slow and unsafe as it is when done raw. His close medium punch stand heavy kick one, however, is quite good. It's not cancelable and doesn't knock down, so it's not super rewarding on its own, but it is only -2 on block, so it carries very little risk. And you can choose to risk nothing at all, since you have a 17 frame cancel window to confirm the second hit. In Second Impact, this gave you a link to Super 3 on the entire cast, but sadly in Third Strike, it only works on a handful of crouches and requires a specific delay on the second hit. The spacing for some of these characters is absurdly specific, and for Elena in particular, it feels like her idle animation causes some consistency issues. Still, if you're truly dedicated to Sean, some of these might be worth practicing. Even without the super, this is nice to have in situations where stronger enders would be unsafe or wouldn't reach, like after a jump in without meter. Sean's taunt is pretty great. I think a lot of people are under the impression that it's strictly a worse version of Dudley's, but I'd say it's probably closer to a side grade, although maybe on a character who's not as well equipped to take advantage of it. Still, there's a few real advantages over Dudley's, and even if it is slightly worse, this is still an extremely unique tool for a Shoto to have. The move has a total duration of 50 frames, compared to 53 for Dudley. Like Dudley, it can be parried both high and low, although this doesn't really matter a ton. It's usually what's coming afterwards that you gotta worry about. And unlike his Rose, its hitbox is active as soon as it leaves Sean's hands. The ball falls slightly faster than Rose does, which I'd say is overall a negative. It does mean that things like block meaty ball into throw are better, but also that's less time the opponent can potentially wake up into an active hitbox, so it's hard to say. Another weakness compared to Dudley's taunt is the worst passive buff. Dudley gets a 25% damage buff on his next hit or combo, while Sean just gets a 12.5% stun buff. Stacks up to 3 times, but like, let's be real, that's not happening.
Something that's not really a strength of Sean, but is still cool, is that on the player 2 side only, on the first game after selecting Sean, he'll throw a ball before the match starts, just like his taunt. You can actually steer this, and if it makes contact with the opponent, you start the round with a little bit of meter. Every little helps. Also, while we're being off topic, God, ball is fun for like stupid combo video bullshit. There's absolutely nothing for Sean, but man, it's fun. Still, taunt is really nice for Sean. There is more to say about it, which I'll touch on soon, but even if it's not up to par with Dudley's, it's cool having something like this on such a different toolkit. And it's got a few interesting perks over it, like being slightly better as a neutral tool, and less corner reliance thanks to Super 2's amazing knockdown. Speaking of, Sean's super situation is not only quite strong, but very unique in that he's one of the only characters in the game with a meaningful choice to make between all three of his supers. They all come with drastically different strengths and weaknesses, but they're all good, and learning to make use of all three is incredibly rewarding and fun. It is worth pointing out that like 12's SFIII, none of these supers are that incredible. Even if having 3 different like B+ tier supers to choose from depending on the matchup and player preference is really fun, it's hard to frame that as a unique strength when characters like Ryu are packing like a B+, and an S tier super. Still, what's here is undeniably good, so let's talk about Sean's super lineup. SFIII is Sean's most flexible super. It's tied for the second shortest bar in the game, and you can stock 3 of them. The damage is pretty low, but this is somewhat compensated for by how often you have access to it, and the extra freedom that you get when using EX moves. It is Sean's slowest super, but that's actually pretty impressive considering it has 2-frame startup and fast travel time, so it is pretty decent for punishing things. It works in basically all the confirms you'd want it to, both high and low parryable and from a meteor-spaced universal overhead. There's also a few unique situations where it's the only super you can land, like off high connects of DP or as a long distance anti-air. It only hits once, which is mostly a downside. It can help with combo consistency in situations where Ryu and Akuma SFIII would be prone to lose hits, but it also means that the super is near useless for chipping out the opponent, or in air resets, since it's only a single parry to escape. Annoyingly, it also has the shortest knockdown of any of Sean's supers. Attempting to set up a taunt after super usually leaves you minus against most of the cast. In certain trades, like against close fireballs or Aegis, it's possible to juggle a second SFIII after landing a first, but these opportunities are hard to come by. Still, SFII's low damage is arguably its biggest weakness, so you'll take whatever you can get. SFIII is a super I remember being seen in a pretty negative light, almost always being considered Sean's worst super. But these days people seem to have a higher opinion of it, and I'm glad, because I think it's one of the coolest supers in the game. It has 2 medium-length bars, the exact same as 12 SFIII funnily enough, providing lots of flexibility with EX and when you use the move itself. SFII's primary issue is its very poor range, which admittedly is a pretty major weakness. It's the worst of the 3 supers for punishing unsafe moves despite its incredible 0-frame startup, and big damage being locked behind being point blank can be a frustrating limitation. Still, SFIII has tons going for it despite this major flaw. The damage is great when mashed, and it's Sean's only super that can be used to realistically chip, and while risky and expensive, it is also Sean's most reliable reversal. EXDP is a little wonky as it loses its invul once the hitbox appears on frame 9, so it's pretty prone to trading, while SFIII has a full 10 frames of invul on startup. It does work as an anti-air too, but you often lose damage and end up swapping sides, which you might not always want. Arguably the best trait of SFIII is its extremely long knockdown. Sean has plenty of time to set up mix both mid-screen and in the corner, and he has several options for how to approach said mix, either going for ambiguous left-rights or ball pressure, either by having ball hit the opponent as they wake up or after Sean hits them, allowing for some really interesting pressure and links. In the corner, Sean also has the option to continue the juggle after SFIII to squeeze out even more damage or set up tricky resets. Close heavy kick gives high damage while resetting the opponent, while medium punch DP and sweep are ideal for a knockdown, although they aren't universal. For example, sweep only works against 4 characters, and both hits of EXDP is even more exclusive, only working on Necro and Urian. It's also possible to combo SFIII into SFIII, which is very flashy but unfortunately scales terribly, so it's only recommended if you need it to secure a round. SFIII is Sean's nuke super and an absolutely phenomenal punishing tool. With 1 frame startup, excellent damage, huge range, and a full 12 frames of invul, this is without a doubt Sean's scariest super when he has it. That last part is the catch however, as Sean can only hold 1 of this super and it's tied for the second longest bar in the game. Sean is very limited in what he can do, both when he needs to build meter for this and immediately after landing it when he has no meter.
Still, Sean's meter build isn't bad, and he generally prefers to play a slower, more defensive game when he can, so he's not totally helpless before he gets this. Sean with Super 3 stocked, however, is pretty scary, as it has the most confirms of any of his supers. It can also punish several moves that were probably intended to be safe, just like Chun SA2 and Ken SA3, and it's actually better as a whiff punish than either in a vacuum. It's probably your best pick in Sean's hardest matchups, where you just need to make one key play with this and then try and carry that momentum to the finish. It does have a few other weaknesses outside of its single long bar. Like SA1, it's kinda useless for chip since it only hits once on block, but since that's not the case on hit, the move doesn't work properly on air connect, so you can't cancel into it from DP, which situationally loses you some damage. This one's not much of a weakness, but SA3 combos will still do less on average than double SA2 combos. But given SA3's flexibility, this is pretty reasonable. Also, while it does give more advantage on knockdown than SA1, the knockdown is also nowhere near as long as SA2, which does limit your potential for ball OP. Although the fact it leaves you closer mid-screen is very nice. Overall, I think Sean's super lineup is one of the biggest reasons to play the character. Even if on their own none of these supers can hang with the top tier supers of Third Strike, being able to realistically use any of them depending on what the situation calls for is really fun, and honestly ties into probably my favourite thing about Sean as a whole. Admittedly, I'm not sure Sean's unique strengths are really enough to warrant playing him over other characters. Unlike 12, there's just not enough here that can be found elsewhere to compensate for their flaws. That being said, I completely understand why someone would want to play Sean, because in my opinion, he's just unbelievably fun. Sean's got plenty of other tools that I didn't really touch on because they're just not strong enough to be classified as strengths, but you can absolutely find places where these moves serve a purpose. His infamous roll gives him 12S low profile and throw-in vol starting on frame 3. As a movement tool or anti-fireball tool, it's atrocious, but it has its place in evading Denjin setups and command grabs, especially on Wake Up where your natural 6 frames of throw-in vol will cover the startup of the roll. It's really nice in this scenario, as on top of netting you a punish, you also steal the corner. You can also cross up the opponent on their Wake Up with it, potentially messing with their reversal input or catching them with a nasty ball mix-up. Sean's tackle is too slow to combo into outside of the extremely niche scenario of landing close heavy kick on a crouching opponent who's just been stunned, and is minus 14 on block. But on top of using the dash without the tackle for tricky mix-ups and pressure, minus 14 is actually safer on block than sweep, so it has a place as a risky but rewarding low poke. EX tackle can deny taunt setups and punish parried necro normals. Far heavy kick can anti-air air tatsus and dive kicks thanks to its pretty active and slightly disjointed hitbox. Overhead kick can catch jump back on top of being a risky mix-up option, while also building the most meter of any of Sean's specials, and forward heavy kick goes from dog shit to decent against characters who can crouch it. A lot of Sean's tools only really give him an inch, but squeezing every little bit of good you can out of them to make a mile is unbelievably rewarding. If you start playing Sean and zero in on exclusively his best tools, you'll probably have a pretty rough time, and will be better off playing another Shoto. However, if you're really willing to commit to him and play a more defensive game, carefully looking to spot stoke poke with your decent normals, cash out big damage whenever you can, and sneak in his more niche tools when their moments to shine come up or if you're feeling lucky, you'll probably have a great time. It might feel like I'm talking out of my ass a little here, but honestly I had an absolute blast playing Sean for this video, and I'll probably continue to play him even afterwards. Even despite his lack of true strengths over other characters, I can absolutely see why someone would play him. Also 12-2 kinda, but we already kinda did their outro, so I don't really know what to add now. Fun fact, did you know how like their SA1 is called X-Needle? Fun fact, my partner pronounces this as Sandal, which, you know, I thought that was worth pointing out. I can kinda see the vision. Whoa, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was definitely a lot of fun to do. Sorry it took so long. This video definitely got a little bit bigger than I was anticipating, but, you know, still really happy with it regardless. And as always, huge thank you to my Patreons and my channel members. I do hope that, like, ever since I moved out and I've had to start shilling a tiny bit in these videos, it hasn't been too annoying. But obviously I gotta take this a little more seriously now. And the support ever since I started doing it has been absolutely unreal. I really can't thank all of you enough. It's been wonderful to see. But yeah, as always, thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will catch you in the next one. Whoa!